All right, let's dive right in and pull apart one of the biggest myths in the world of organized crime, the Triads.
So when you hear that name, Triad, what immediately comes to mind? Is it some shadowy group of global masterminds running a criminal empire? Or is the reality something else entirely? That's the big question we're going to unpack.
So let's start with what most of us think we know, the myth of the masterminds.
This quote right here just nails it. Triads are not the masterminds, yet ordinary people still become victims. That sentence really captures the whole puzzle, you know? The gap between the legend and the very real damage they cause.
I mean, we've all seen it in the movies, right? These incredibly powerful, almost cool gangsters who are part of some ancient global conspiracy trying to take over the world. It makes for a great story, but it also hides the truth about who these groups really are.
And to get to that truth, we have to go way back, because they didn't start out as criminals at all. They actually began as rebel societies. The original group was called the Tiandihui, which means the Heaven and Earth Society. They popped up back in 17th century China with one very political goal: to kick out the ruling Qing dynasty and bring back the old Ming dynasty. So think of them less like a crime family and more like a secret club for revolutionaries.
And you can see this wild transformation over hundreds of years. In the 1600s, they're patriots. Fast forward to the 1800s, and with all the chaos from wars and people moving around the globe, that political fire starts to die down. But the real game changer was 1949. The communist victory in China basically scattered these groups, and they ended up setting up shop in places like Hong Kong, which is where their modern criminal identity really took shape.
So this leads us straight into that huge pivot, the moment they turned from a political cause to organized crime.
So what made them flip? Well, it wasn't just one thing. First off, high-minded political goals kind of went out the window when it was just about surviving. In these new overseas communities, they stepped into a power vacuum, acting as unofficial police and judges where the real law didn't reach. And, let's be honest, they quickly figured out that stuff like gambling and smuggling paid a whole lot better than revolution.
But here's the interesting part. Even as they became criminals, they hung on to this really complex internal culture. We're talking secret codes, elaborate rituals, the whole nine yards.
And they weren't just a disorganized mob. They had this very clear structure, with ranks all tied to these symbolic numbers. At the top, you had the 489, the mountain master, the big boss. The muscle was the 438, the red pole. The brains of the operation was the 415, the white paper fan, and the guy who connects everyone was the 432, the straw sandal. It was a system that kept everything running.
Now, you might think all the secret handshakes and blood oaths were just for dramatic flair, but they had a super practical purpose. See, back then, a lot of members couldn't read or write, so these rituals were basically a form of social technology. It was how you sealed a deal and guaranteed loyalty when you couldn't just sign a contract.
And all of this brings us to the real heart of the matter, their actual economic role, which is a million miles away from the movie version.
Okay, so here's the side-by-side. The myth is this one giant, super powerful organization trying to take over the planet. The reality? It's a messy, spread-out network of groups that are more like, well, adjustment mechanisms for local black markets. They aren't running the world. They're just finding and exploiting the cracks. So what does that actually look like? Just follow the money. Their cash comes from things that are opportunistic and pretty local. Online gambling, scams, smuggling, and selling so-called protection. It's way less about some grand conspiracy and way more about gritty, street-level hustles.
To put it really simply, their real power was never about controlling governments. It's always been about finding those profitable gaps between what's legal and what the law can actually control.
So where does all this leave them now? Let's take a look at the Triads of tomorrow.
I mean, the organization has changed so much. They went from those very visible, ritual-heavy groups of the past to much more decentralized, almost cell-based operations today. And the future? It looks like it's heading toward these fluid digital networks that focus on online crimes that cross borders, making them incredibly hard to track.
But it's definitely not a cakewalk for them. They're facing some major headwinds. We're talking advanced government surveillance, cops from different countries working together better than ever, and seriously tough anti-money laundering laws. But maybe the biggest challenge is that the old-school rituals and ethnic ties that held them together just don't mean as much in today's world.
Which leaves us with this final thought to chew on. As crime keeps moving online, becoming totally borderless and anonymous,
Are old names like Triad even going to matter anymore? Or will they just sort of dissolve into this new global digital underworld? It's a wild question when you think about how far they've come from being 17th century rebels.